Officer Tases the wrong black man. Seconds later, she's the one in handcuffs. Get on the ground right now, I said. Get down. The crackle of 50,000 volts split the humid night air, followed by a sickening thud. Officer Emily Carter smirked, her taser still smoking. She thought she had just bagged a dangerous fugitive, proving her dominance on the streets. She thought she was a hero. But as she stepped over the agonizingly twitching body of Marcus Reed, the blaring sirens that suddenly swarmed her weren't coming for him, they were coming for her. What happens when a corrupt cop targets the absolute worst possible man? Stay tuned, because this karma is brutal. The oppressive humidity of a late August night in Atlanta clung to the windshield of the Dodge Charger Pursuit like a wet rag. Inside the cruiser, the air conditioning blasted at maximum, but it did nothing to cool the simmering agitation in Officer Emily Carter's chest. At 28 years old, Emily had been on the Atlanta Police Department force for barely 4 years, but she carried herself with the hardened, cynical swagger of a 30-year veteran. She tapped her manicured fingers against the steering wheel, her eyes scanning the dimly lit sidewalks near the edge of Piedmont Park. To Emily, the city was not a community to be protected. It was a hunting ground, and she was the apex predator. Emily's record was a patchwork quilt of commendations for aggressive drug busts and a disturbingly high number of excessive force complaints. 3 times in the past year she had been brought before internal affairs. 3 times she had slipped through the cracks, shielded by the blue wall of silence, and a union rep who knew how to exploit administrative loopholes. Her hubris had grown with every dismissed complaint. She truly believed she was untouchable, the embodiment of a law that she alone had the right to interpret and enforce. Her Motorola APX radio crackled, slicing through the low hum of the engine. All units in Zone 5, be on the lookout for a 1017 armed robbery suspect fleeing the vicinity of 10th and Monroe. Suspect is a black male, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing dark clothing and a black hoodie, considered armed and dangerous. Emily's lips curled into a predatory half-smile. A vague description. To a disciplined officer, a vague description is a call for heightened situational awareness and careful investigation. To Officer Emily Carter, it was a blank check. She slammed her foot on the accelerator, the V8 engine roaring to life as the cruiser tore down the asphalt, blowing through a stale red light. She wasn't interested in waiting for backup. She wanted the collar, and more importantly, she wanted the thrill of the subjugation. As she turned onto a quiet residential street lined with ancient oak trees, her high beams caught a figure walking calmly on the sidewalk. He was a black male. He was tall. He was wearing a dark navy windbreaker over a grey shirt and dark jeans. He wasn't running. He wasn't acting suspiciously. He was simply walking while looking at his smartphone. Gotcha, Emily whispered to herself. She didn't run his description against the reality of the situation. The bolo said a black hoodie. This man wore a navy windbreaker. The bolo said fleeing. This man was strolling. None of that mattered to her. She reached up to her chest and deliberately tapped the center of her Axon Body 3 camera. She didn't turn it on. In her mind, cameras were a nuisance, an electronic leash designed by desk jockeys who didn't understand the realities of street survival. She wanted total control of the narrative just in case this guy decided to resist. She hit the siren, a brief deafening chirp that echoed off the brick facades of the nearby town homes, and swerved her cruiser sharply toward the curb, cutting off the pedestrian's path. She threw the car into park, unbuckled her seatbelt in one fluid motion, and kicked her door open. Her hand immediately rested on the grip of her standard issue, Glock 19 Gen 5. She was ready for a fight. She was eager for one. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly fathom in her narrow, arrogant worldview, was that the man on the sidewalk was not a random citizen in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was exactly where he intended to be, and he had been waiting for her. Marcus Reed did not flinch when the 2-ton police cruiser aggressively hopped the curb, stopping mere inches from his leather dress shoes. He slowly lowered his smartphone, locking the screen, and took a deep, measured breath. His heart rate remained perfectly steady at 65 beats per minute. Panic was an emotion Marcus had trained out of his system over a decade ago. Marcus was not an armed robber. He was Special Agent Marcus Reed, a senior investigator with the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Civil Rights Division. Moreover, he was the lead agent on a joint Department of Justice task force specifically assigned to investigate a pattern of constitutional violations, racial profiling, and police brutality within the Atlanta Police Department's Zone 5. And Officer Emily Carter was the very top name on his list. For 6 months, Marcus and his team had been building a case against Carter. They had interviewed her victims. Citizens who had their faces smashed into pavement for asking questions, teenagers who had been illegally searched and detained, and men who had been tased for simply exercising their First Amendment rights. But building a federal case under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, was notoriously difficult. They needed irrefutable proof. They needed to catch her in the act, unabashed and unrestrained. Tonight was a meticulously orchestrated sting. The armed robbery radio call was entirely fabricated, broadcast on a secure encrypted frequency that had been temporarily bridged to Carter's patrol sector by a federal cyber technician. Marcus was the bait. Beneath his dark navy windbreaker, taped securely to his chest, was a state-of-the-art microtransmitter. In his right ear, practically invisible, was a micro receiver. 2 blocks away, in a darkened alley behind a defunct textile warehouse, sat an unmarked black Chevrolet Suburban. Inside, it was a mobile command center packed with glowing monitors, audio recording equipment, and a heavily armed FBI SWAT element commanded by Marcus's supervisor, Director Helen Vance. "We have eyes on Marcus," Vance's voice whispered in his earpiece, crisp and calm. "Overwatch drone is loitering at 400 feet with infrared and optical. We see the cruiser. We see her stepping out. Body posture is highly aggressive. Remember, do not escalate, but give her enough rope to hang herself. We are 30 seconds out on your mark. Copy," Marcus muttered, his lips barely moving. He watched as the officer approached. Even in the dim streetlights, he could see the hostility radiating from her. She walked with her shoulders squared, her chin thrust forward, her hand resting threateningly on her sidearm. It was a textbook display of command presence, twisted into overt intimidation. Marcus had seen it 1,000 times in corrupt departments across the country. It was the strut of someone who believed the badge was a crown rather than a shield. Marcus stood his ground, keeping his hands empty, visible, and resting casually at his sides. He was a highly educated 36-year-old man who held a law degree from Georgetown and a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He could have dismantled the officer in front of him in 3 seconds flat, but tonight was not about physical dominance. It was about legal destruction. "Let's see how you play this, Officer Carter," Marcus thought to himself. He composed his face into an expression of mild confusion, playing the role of the innocent civilian perfectly. He was ready to absorb whatever abuse she hurled his way, knowing that every word she spoke, every action she took, was currently being beamed to a federal hard drive, sealing her fate in real time. The trap was set. The predator was stepping right into it. "Hey, you stop right there and keep your hands where I can see them." Emily's voice was a sharp, grating bark that shattered the quiet of the neighborhood. Marcus stopped immediately. He did exactly as instructed, raising his hands slowly to chest level, palms facing outward. "Officer, is there a problem?" he asked. His voice was deep, resonant, and entirely devoid of the fear Emily usually expected and demanded from the people she stopped. "I'm asking the questions here, tough guy," Emily sneered, closing the distance between them until she was standing less than 3 feet away, violating his personal space in a deliberate attempt to provoke a reaction. "Turn around, face away from me now." Marcus did not immediately turn. Instead, he maintained eye contact. "Officer, I am happy to cooperate, but I would like to know why I am being detained. I'm just walking to my car." Emily's jaw clenched. The absolute audacity of this man to question her. He wasn't cowering. He wasn't stuttering. He was speaking to her as an equal, and in her warped hierarchy of the streets, that was a direct challenge to her authority. "You fit the description of an armed robbery suspect who just hit a liquor store 3 blocks from here," Emily lied effortlessly. "Now turn the hell around before I make you turn around. Hold your ground, Marcus. She's deviating from all standard stop and frisk protocols," Director Vance's voice whispered in his ear. "Audio is crystal clear." "An armed robbery," Marcus said, his tone perfectly balancing cooperative and inquisitive. "Officer, I've been at a dinner meeting at the High Museum of Art. I'm wearing a windbreaker, not a hoodie. If you'd like, I can show you my identification. It's in my inner breast pocket." "Don't you dare reach for anything," Emily shouted, her hand abandoning her Glock and moving instead to the bright yellow Taser X26P holstered on her non-dominant side. The snap of the retention strap being undone was loud in the night air. Marcus kept his hands raised. "I am not reaching. I am explicitly telling you where my ID is so you can verify who I am. My name is Marcus Reed. If you just look at my credentials. I don't care what your name is, and I don't care about your fake ID, Emily interrupted, her adrenaline spiking. She hated this. She hated his calmness. It made her feel small, and the only way she knew how to feel big again was to inflict pain. She drew the taser, pointing the dual laser sights directly at Marcus's chest. 2 red dots danced over his heart. Turn around, get on your knees, and interlace your fingers behind your head. This is your last warning. Officer Carter, Marcus said, deliberately using her name, which he had read off her uniform nameplate. You are pointing a weapon at an unarmed man who is fully complying and offering identification. Under the Fourth Amendment, you do not have the probable cause or reasonable suspicion required to escalate this to a use of force. Emily's eyes went wide with fury. A street lawyer. That was the absolute last straw. Oh, we got a constitutional scholar here, she mocked, her voice dripping with venom. Let me teach you a lesson about the law on my streets, Marcus. She's drawn her less lethal. Stand by. Intervention team is rolling ETA. 10 seconds, Vance urged over the wire. I am slowly going to reach into my left pocket with my left hand to retrieve my wallet, Marcus stated clearly, narrating his actions for the federal audio recording. I am unarmed. I said, get on the ground, Emily screamed. Marcus moved his left hand deliberately slow toward his jacket. It was a completely non-threatening motion, broadcast with clear intent. But Emily Carter didn't see a man reaching for ID. She saw an excuse. She saw an opportunity to break someone who had dared to stand tall in her presence. Without another word, she pulled the trigger. Pop! The sound of the compressed nitrogen cartridge deploying was unmistakable. 2 barbed darts shot from the yellow plastic casing of the taser at over 160 feet per second. They trailed thin insulated copper wires behind them, scattering dozens of tiny, brightly colored confetti-like aphids, anti-felon identification tags, across the concrete, each printed with the taser's serial number. 1 barb embedded itself deeply into the fabric of Marcus's windbreaker, piercing the skin of his upper chest. The second barb struck lower, catching him in the abdomen. The circuit was complete. 50,000 volts of electricity instantly flooded Marcus's central nervous system. The neuromuscular incapacitation was immediate, violent, and absolute. Every striated muscle in his body locked up simultaneously. His arms flew outward, his legs stiffened completely straight, and a sharp, involuntary grunt escaped his lips as all the air was forcefully expelled from his lungs. Marcus hit the unforgiving asphalt of the sidewalk like a felled tree. He couldn't brace his fall. His hands were completely paralyzed. The side of his face slammed into the concrete, instantly splitting the skin above his cheekbone. Blood began to pool, stark and dark under the amber glow of the street lamp. For 5 agonizing seconds, the taser cycled, sending rapid pulses of electricity through his body, causing his limbs to rigidify and twitch. Through the blinding white pain and the total loss of bodily control, Marcus' mind remained sharp. The trap has sprung, he thought through the agony. We have her. The taser cycle ended. The electricity stopped, leaving Marcus gasping for breath, his muscles burning with lactic acid, his body temporarily paralyzed by the shock. Emily Carter didn't secure her weapon. She didn't call for medical assistance, a mandatory protocol after a taser deployment. Instead, she laughed, a cruel, breathless chuckle. She holstered her taser, unclipped her heavy metal handcuffs, and walked over to where Marcus lay bleeding and gasping on the ground. She drove the hard steel toe of her tactical boot directly into the center of Marcus's back, pinning him to the pavement. Not so tough now, are you, scholar? She taunted, grabbing his left wrist and twisting it violently upward, far past the natural point of resistance, causing a fresh wave of blinding pain to shoot through Marcus's shoulder. I offered you ID, Marcus managed to wheeze out, tasting copper from the cut on his cheek. And I offered you a chance to comply, Emily shouted, dropping her full body weight onto her knee, driving it into his spine. You think you can talk back to me? You think you own these streets because you wear a nice jacket? You're nothing. You're a thug who resisted arrest, and you're going to a cage. She reached down, violently yanking the wallet from his inner breast pocket. Let's see who you really are, tough guy. She flipped the leather wallet open with one hand, but it wasn't a standard bifold wallet. It was a black leather credential case. Emily's eyes dropped to the contents. On the bottom half was a heavy gold eagle-topped shield. On the top half was a federal identification card, complete with Marcus's photo, an official seal, and the bold, undeniable letters, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent. The triumphant smirk vanished from Emily Carter's face, as if it had been wiped off with a rag. The blood drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin a sickening ashen grey. The heavy summer heat suddenly felt freezing cold. The badge glinted in the streetlight, mocking her. What is this?" she stammered, her voice suddenly trembling. The absolute authority she had wielded just seconds ago evaporated into the humid air. She looked down at the man bleeding beneath her boot. Before Marcus could speak, the world around Emily exploded into chaos. The quiet neighborhood street was suddenly transformed into a tactical nightmare. There were no police sirens, just the terrifying, guttural roar of high-performance engines pushed to their limits. From the north, a massive, matte, black Chevrolet Suburban screeched around the corner, its tires smoking as it violently hopped the curb, and slammed to a halt directly in front of Emily's patrol car, blocking it in. From the south, a second identical Suburban boxed her in from the rear. Before the vehicles had even fully stopped, the doors flew open. Federal agents dropped the weapon. "Step away from the man on the ground." The commands came from multiple directions, overlapping, booming through tactical megaphones, deafening and absolute. Emily stood frozen, her brain short-circuiting. 6 men and 2 women, all clad in heavy olive-drab tactical gear, Kevlar helmets, and vests emblazoned with massive yellow FBI lettering, swarmed the scene. They moved with terrifying, fluid precision. Every single one of them had an M4 carbine raised, the laser sights converging into a blinding cluster of red dots directly on the center of Emily's chest. I said, "Step away." "Do it now," roared a towering tactical agent, closing the distance in 3 massive strides. Emily stumbled backward, raising her hands, dropping Marcus's credential case onto the pavement. Wait, I'm PD. I'm Officer Carter. He's a suspect." "This is a misunderstanding." From the passenger side of the lead Suburban, a woman stepped out. She wore a tailored black suit that contrasted sharply with the heavily armed tactical team around her. Her silver hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her expression was as hard and cold as granite. This was Director Helen Vance, the special agent in charge of the DOJ task force. Vance did not walk. She marched. She ignored Emily completely and went straight to Marcus. 2 tactical medics were already kneeling beside him, carefully removing the taser barbs, stabilizing his neck, and helping him into a sitting position. Vance handed Marcus a handkerchief to press against his bleeding cheek.
"You good, Agent Reed?"
Vance asked, her voice low, but carrying easily in the sudden silence of the street. Marcus took the handkerchief, wiping the blood from his eye. He looked up at Vance and gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I'm good, Director. The recording device functioned perfectly. Audio and physiological telemetry are secure." Emily Carter felt the world tilt on its axis. "Agent Reed, Director, recording device." The words hit her harder than the 50,000 volts had hit Marcus. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. She looked desperately at the surrounding agents. Their faces were impassive, locked behind ballistic glasses, their weapons utterly steady. She was completely surrounded, not by street thugs, but by the highest echelon of federal law enforcement. "Director Vance," Marcus said, his voice regaining its strength as he stood up, supported briefly by a medic. He pointed a steady, accusatory finger at Emily. "That officer detained me without reasonable suspicion, ignored my attempts to provide identification, deployed a less lethal weapon against a compliant subject, and engaged in post-deployment physical assault." Vance slowly turned her gaze to Emily. It was the look a biologist gives to an insect under a microscope. "Officer Emily Carter," Vance said, her voice dripping with absolute authority. "I am Director Vance with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've been watching you for a very, very long time." "Listen to me," Emily pleaded, her voice cracking. The arrogant predator replaced instantly by a terrified child. He fit a description. I was doing my job. "You can't do this." "Agent Miller," Vance said, ignoring Emily's frantic babbling. "Disarm her." A massive tactical agent stepped forward, grabbed Emily roughly by the shoulder, and spun her around. Emily didn't dare resist. In a matter of seconds, Agent Miller stripped her of her Glock, her taser, her baton, and her radio. He tossed the weapons unceremoniously onto the hood of the FBI Suburban. "I have the right to union representation," Emily screamed, tears of pure panic welling in her eyes as the reality of the situation crushed the air from her lungs. "I want my captain." "Your captain," Vance said, stepping within inches of Emily's face, "is currently being raided at his home by another federal team for conspiracy to cover up civil rights violations. Your union rep can't help you with a federal indictment." Vance reached into her suit jacket and pulled out a folded piece of heavy parchment. She held it up so Emily could see the official seal of the United States District Court for the Northern District of Georgia. "Officer Carter," Vance read, her voice ringing out like a death knell in the humid night. "I hold in my hand a federal arrest warrant signed by a United States magistrate judge. You are hereby under arrest for violations of Title 18, United States Code, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, as well as federal assault charges." Marcus, now standing on his own, walked slowly over to where Emily stood. The blood was still wet on his cheek, a stark visual testament to her brutality. He looked down at her. He didn't gloat. He didn't scream. His expression was one of profound, pitying disappointment. "You thought the badge made you a god," Marcus said softly. "But all it did was make you a target for the real law. You swore an oath to protect the Constitution, Carter. Tonight you assaulted it. And you assaulted the wrong damn man. Turn around," Agent Miller commanded. Emily Carter, sobbing openly now, her mascara running down her face in dark streaks, turned around. The metallic click-clack of the heavy, oversized federal handcuffs ratcheting down on her wrists was the loudest sound she had ever heard. It was the sound of her career ending. It was the sound of her freedom evaporating. "You have the right to remain silent," Agent Miller recited, his voice a droning monolith of justice. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As she was shoved roughly into the back of the darkened FBI Suburban, Emily caught a final glimpse of her own patrol car. Its lights were still flashing, illuminating the quiet street. It looked like a tombstone. The doors of the Suburban slammed shut, plunging her into total darkness. The predator had finally been caged. 18 months later, the courtroom inside the Richard B. Russell Federal Building in downtown Atlanta was silent, save for the hushed hum of the air conditioning. The mahogany walls felt imposing, heavy with the weight of consequence. Marcus Reed sat at the prosecution table, dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit. The faint silver scar above his cheekbone was the only remaining physical evidence of the night at Piedmont Park. The emotional and legal evidence, however, had been overwhelming. Across the aisle sat Emily Carter. The swagger was entirely gone. She looked small, pale and thoroughly broken in her beige prison jumpsuit. The trial had been a media spectacle, a watershed moment in the fight against police corruption. The federal prosecutors hadn't just relied on Marcus's testimony. They had played the crystal-clear audio from his wire. They had shown the high-definition infrared drone footage that captured Emily bypassing all protocols to attack a compliant citizen. Worse for Emily, her arrest had broken the blue wall. Facing their own federal indictments, 3 of her fellow officers, including her former captain, had flipped. They testified at length about her history of planting evidence, falsifying reports, and using excessive force. The jury had deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Now it was time for sentencing. The Honorable Judge Elena Davis, a stern woman known for her zero-tolerance policy on corruption, looked down at Emily over her reading glasses. "Emily Carter," Judge Davis began, her voice echoing through the silent courtroom, "law enforcement officers are granted extraordinary powers by the public trust. The power to detain, the power to use force, the power to take a life. When an officer abuses that power for their own ego, they do not just harm their victim, they poison the entire well of justice. You used your badge as a weapon of terror against the very citizens you were sworn to protect." Emily kept her eyes glued to the defense table, tears dropping silently onto her handcuffed wrists. "The fact that your victim happened to be a federal agent running a sting operation does not make your crime worse in the eyes of the law," Judge Davis continued. "But it certainly exposed the horrific depths of your hubris. You operated with a terrifying certainty that you would never face consequences." Judge Davis picked up her wooden gavel. "For the deprivation of rights under color of law, and for aggravated assault, it is the judgment of this court that you be committed to the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons for a term of 120 months, 10 years, without the possibility of early parole." Bang! The gavel fell. The sound made Emily physically flinch. 10 years, a decade behind bars, surrounded by the very people she used to hunt, locked in a system she used to manipulate. Karma had not just hit her, it had annihilated her. As the U.S. Marshals moved in to escort Emily away, she locked eyes with Marcus Reed one last time. He didn't smile. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement that the scales of justice had been forcibly balanced. Marcus packed up his briefcase, walked out of the courtroom, and stepped out into the bright Atlanta sunlight, ready to hunt down the next predator hiding behind a badge. What an absolutely insane turn of events. Emily thought she was above the law, but she found out the hard way that nobody is untouchable, especially when the FBI is watching your every move. This story is a powerful reminder that hubris and corruption eventually meet their match. And when karma hits, it hits like 50,000 volts. What did you guys think about Marcus's incredible trap? Did Emily deserve the 10 years she got, or should it have been more? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this intense justice-served drama, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. Share this video with someone who loves a good karma story. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another wild story.